Hey guys, Kinggath here, and welcome to another episode of the Kinggath podcast. Today we are sitting down to talk to one of my personal heroes because he basically, and all of yours too, you guys just don't know it yet, but if it were not for this man, I probably would have abandoned ship on Sim Settlements and hit it at some point because of a very, very dumb mistake I made with the initial release. Welcome MarkDF. He is the creator of Fallroom Tools.
Hi there.
Hey man, so I bet you've never heard me say that you were my hero.
No, I haven't. No.
So when I first released Sim Settlements, I had accidentally put an infinite while loop in, and it would break the entire workshop system. And it took a while. It took about 2 or 3 hours of playing with the mod before you'd realize it had happened, and then it was basically too late. And I couldn't figure it out for the life of me. Like I dove through my code, couldn't find it. I was like, there's nothing wrong here. There's no explanation for why this is happening. And then I tossed my code over to Registrator 2000, who's a damn wizard with Fallout 4. And fortunately, he was kind enough to comb through my code and find my mistake and see that I had nested 2 while loops, and the incrementers for each were inside the inner loop, so that it could just get stuck if the inside one never triggered. And which is why it would take a little while. And so basically, I was going to have to announce, I'm sorry, I just blew up all of your guys' save files. I'm retiring. I'm terrible. and then I found Fallroom Tools and figured out the active script thing that you could terminate scripts, and it worked perfectly, and was able to terminate that infinite loop. And then I just put out a YouTube video explaining how to do it, and then I taught a bunch of people who were helping me with support. And so we were able to rescue everyone on PC's save files. And then it was just left. Unfortunately, at that point, I hadn't released on Xbox, or it had such a small following on Xbox at that point where it wasn't fatal to the mod. And now I've become like a very, very vigilant loop user in Papyrus after that moment. But yeah, if it weren't for Fallroom Tools, I was going to have to tell a whole lot of people that they were just SOL and their saves were bonked. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So what was your inspiration for creating a tool like that? Because that's a pretty complicated thing to undertake. Because understanding those save file formats is quite the task.
It's kind of roundabout, and it started back in Skyrim.
Okay.
So Skyrim had this bug called the string table bug. The table in which all text was stored could only hold 65,536 entries, which the base game uses with the DLCs, used about 25,000.
And that's the people's names and the messages and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that also included all the names of variables and properties and scripts.
Ooh. Wow.
Yeah. And certain mods, like interesting NPCs, would suck up 4,000 more entries just like that.
Yeah.
And me and some other people were trying to figure out why our save games were being corrupted and not loading. And eventually someone clued in that, yes, there's this problem. And the initial idea was a terrible one. I came up with a way to load all of a mod's scripts,
okay,
and rewrite them to not use unique names across each script.
Sure.
Because if 2 scripts can use the same name, and that's fine, as long as it's not a property.
Right.
And it actually causes all kinds of problems that are very subtle and hard to pick up, but it did actually lower string counts. So
sure. So you're able to.
And I still occasionally get a message from someone who wants to use that old tool.
What was the later solution then? It sounds like that was just like a band-aid solution. Did you or did Bethesda end up patching something?
Neither. Another modder came out with a mod called Crash Fixes.
Okay.
For Skyrim, which is an SKSE plugin, which goes and changes the way the string table is accessed, so it can store up to 4 billion.
Whoa, there we go. That's a good solution.
Basically just changing these 16-bit indexes to 32-bit.
Right, gotcha.
And it worked really well.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a subtle and simple solution. And I imagine that there's such a solution available for the other problem we were talking about that came up recently in my testing because we're pushing the envelope with sim settlements now is a solution to the script data limitation. Everybody I've talked to who knows more than I do about file formats and memory loading and stuff suggested that it's likely there's just some arbitrary memory allocation done, and the game can't get past that. So we have to like figure out where in the executable that it's triggering that set or it's allocating that memory and just up it. And I have no idea how to do it. That's such a thing way beyond my skill set because I'm a web programmer, which means I basically cheated my way to programming because I never had to learn the hard stuff like you did. And so that I think is the same thing. I think there's a lot of that in the creation engine is Bethesda builds it out trying to optimize. And so they're like, oh, well, this is, there's no way anyone could ever need more than this, not thinking that modders will always need more than what they give us.
Yeah. And the fact that it's 64 megabytes makes it sound like it's almost certainly the same thing, like a 16-bit index.
Yeah.
And if it could be changed to 32, it would be fine.
Right.
Because in the case of the string table, the table itself could be any size. Just the indexes to find things in it. Sure.
Is just that's the only limiter there, and that was enough to choke it all up.
Yeah.
Huh. So that was the first stage. We'll come back to the script data limit because I definitely want to talk about it some more, but I want to keep going. I don't want to get off topic on our fall room tools thing. So this is how it started. You started trying to tackle that. Then where did you go from there?
Well, so this change meant that the existing Skyrim save game editors and cleaners didn't work on any save game that was over this limit, even with the fix. And the one of them was no longer supported, and that was Save Game Script Cleaner, which had a fantastic interface, which I completely ripped off. And the other was Save Game Script Scalable, which the person who made that, Flex Creator, had moved on to Fallout 4.
Okay.
So, but he was kind enough to provide me with his source code.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which made it a lot easier to go in and write my own.
Yeah, for sure.
So and his way of doing things was a little smarter in some ways. Like the fact that you can terminate scripts the way you can in Fall Room Tools comes from him. He was the one that said, no, you can't just erase these things. You have to zero them.
Right.
Right. Change all the commands to the no instruction command.
Okay.
And that's how you terminate it. That's how you terminate a script.
And I think, from as far as I can tell, maybe you can confirm this because this comes up a lot. So it's because our team happens to be one of the more helpful ones in the Fallout community, I get asked a lot of questions all the time about just modding in general and save files and stuff. And the thing comes up all the time now is because I've been such an advocate of using Fall Room Tools is sometimes they will open up their active script section and they'll find that there are scripts that were terminated and they never did it. They're like, I've never opened Fall Room Tools on this character yet. Is that something the base game can do occasionally, where it'll just terminate a script internally that you've seen?
Some scripts just don't have anything in them, and
Okay.
so to Fall Room Tools, it looks like they've been terminated because all they'll have is like one command that says no instruction.
Got it. That makes way more sense because I was like, you must be lying. You must have opened it in Fall Room Tools to these people. I was like, are you sure? Are you sure you didn't open it? And now I just look like a jackass. So,
Yeah,
but good to know that's how we do.
There may be other circumstances where it can happen. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot that I don't know about the file format too.
Sure.
It's some parts of it are pretty opaque.
But you know a lot. You know quite a bit. More than the rest of us, I think. But I had gone through the same trouble learning all of the script. I actually had to figure out the hexadecimal and how it converts for the VMAD for the script data so that I could make city plans work. And I don't ever want to do that again. I don't know how people do that. Just slowly parsing through those hex blocks. Oof.
Yeah, it just really hurts your head after a while.
Oh, absolutely.
And every so often you look at it and it just starts to look like a page of numbers again. You lose the pattern.
Right. It's like, oh, I had it. I was sure. I knew. It was like these 8 were this. These 8 blocks were this. And because I tried to help you for a little while on because one of the biggest things that the community would love that we still want in the community is a way to rescue corrupt cells, because the game still seems to be able to get itself into a state where crossing a cell boundary crashes the game. And you and I had tried to make some headway on it. We had found some certain things that were triggering it. That's how, like, my conversations with you led to where we figured out that it was definitely the power grid, which then led to Reg2K coming up with the power grid fix, and that fixes it for a lot of people, but it still doesn't fix it for everybody. So the going through that cell stuff, that was a beast, and we still didn't even barely scratch the surface of it. I know you started making some progress. Has that been something you've looked at again since we've last worked on it?
No, it's something that's very time consuming because
Right.
you have to, at least for me, I have to have a lot of information in my head all at once and in Notepad all at once, and it's a lot. It takes like hours and hours to get into that headspace, and it's been quite a while since I've had a block of time like that.
Sure. Yeah, I get you exactly. The you have to, because at first you get into the headspace, and then like just in those couple hours, and only then can you start to try and solve things. And it's very incremental progress. And then if you have to stop, then you almost have to start over again the next time you can sit down, unless you happen to be able to do it like the next morning or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Yeah,
at this point, to really decode things like something like that, I would need to end up unemployed for a month. and at that point, I'd have other problems, right?
Right. So now everyone's secretly rooting for you to lose your job.
Oh, yeah.
That's so unfortunate. That I would be nice to see. I don't know why Bethesda hasn't released more information on that. Like, they're super supportive of the mod community, and I can't imagine what the downside to just being like, here's our file format. Like, this is exactly how we do it. Because, like, what's the worst that can happen? They're already a single player game, like, that we've already got access to. You know, they let us do script extenders. You know what? It's not going to be. I'm sure their format isn't going to be a useful tool for other developers. So it's not like they're worried about espionage or something. So I'm just curious. I wonder why they haven't done that, released it, or maybe nobody's asked, and maybe it would be as simple as like, hey, would you mind giving us your internal documentation on save files and see what they say?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a lot of software companies are just very against that in general.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, ask anyone who works with like Microsoft Code or, I mean, any big software company, and they'll say like, I wish we could get the source code for this and take a look at it.
Right.
But unless you're in the open source community, yeah, it just almost never happens.
Right. Well, I don't feel like we even need the source code. It would be almost like, can you give us like your wireframe of your layout for save files? Because, for example, like the cell, like knowing the blocks that can possibly be in the cell change forms list would be huge. Because right now we have to decipher each of them completely blind. Like, we have to guess how many. Like, we can figure out the very first byte easily. We know that that's an identifier, and then usually the following is telling you the length that you can expect from that identifier. But then beyond that, then it just becomes just like a horrible mess to sort out. It's just a lot of trial and error.
And I always wondered if Bethesda did give up some of that information for Skyrim, because the amount of because there is some published information about the Skyrim save file format,
Okay.
and some of it's very detailed, and like so detailed that it's hard to believe that someone just went through, stared at the hex, and figured it out, because
Right.
it's really specific in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
So like I wonder if Flex Creator or someone, convinced Bethesda to give up some of this information.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Or it could be that they just went through piece by piece and fire an arrow and immediately save and see what changed.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, if they came up with a quick enough workflow to just keep trying over and over again. I mean, or it's one of these, like, I was talking with Nero the other day about how crazy some of the modding scenes are for other games that are really popular in Russia, and that there's a lot of Eastern Europeans and Russians who are just like gods in coding and can just do things we don't even imagine. Like, maybe one of them just had at it and solved the cube with just brute force. I don't know. It also seems like one of those things where you had suggested a potential thing we could approach it with, which I thought was really cool and would have been fun to play with. And I think you said you started it, and then I don't know what happened with that, but of setting it up to where you could mouse over the change form block or the hex blocks and let the not really AI, but just let it like do a quick test of several chunks of bytes, and if any of them like convert it into something useful, then it could display that temporarily so that you could, try and get like a spot check to see if anything jumped at you. Did you ever have any progress with something like that? Because that seems to be like it might be a good. So like it almost seems like one of those problems. This is why we need AI to solve our computer problems. Of like you just throw AI at that if you had the right. Because we're almost training ourselves like you train AI. Like we start looking through those blocks of it, and we're like, okay, that's a match, good. Where you could almost teach it. You could almost give the positive reinforcement to the AI tables.
Yeah, I had that sort of half built, and that's.
Okay.
And then I suddenly got a new job, and and at that job I was commuting 3 hours a day, so
Oy.
At that point I didn't have any energy for anything, and
oh my god,
and I haven't looked at it since then, but I would like to get back to that particular tool.
Yeah, that seemed like it would be a really cool tool, just to trying to find our way through, because I can get unlimited examples. Like people love to send me their save files to try and help them rescue them, and I get why. Like this is why for me that the moment when I screwed up sim settlements and because it had become it blew up out of nowhere, and realizing how many people's games I would have ruined and the investment that we put into these. Are you one of the types of people like the most of Skyrim and Fallout 4 players where you sit down with a new character and you plan on putting several hundred hours into them? You're in your head, you're like, I'm going to go do all the side quests and I'm going to finish this line and that and do this mod.
In my head, I am.
Sure.
I have trouble getting past 20 or 30 hours because then a new mod comes out or a big update to a mod I have, and then I'm back to square one.
Right. So like just that idea of people are preparing to or actually investing so much of their time into these characters that I would just feel horrendous destroying them. So then having tools like yours to be able to rescue those is amazing. So again, I know I said it at the beginning, but I cannot thank you enough for putting in the time you did do into Fallroom tools. So I think we all owe you, especially those of us on PCU who have used it many times to rescue saves or figure out what was going on. It's also been a fantastic troubleshooting tool just to be able to like, when we're starting to script, a lot like several people on the team, we will use yours to test and see if we're backing up the scripts too. We can use it just as a quick spot check to see if we're causing too much script lag. So if we're getting, if our loops are taking too long, it's way easier to check in there than to try and parse out the what's it called? I'm trying to think of Bethesda's tool that they have built in there. They have a tool in there that you can use to the profile analyzer. Like the profile analyzer takes forever to step through, but takes 3 seconds to look at the active scripts count in Fallroom tools and see what see if we got a problem. So
yeah, that's something awesome. I do myself a fair bit. I load up. If I think I might have too many mods installed, I load up my save game and it's like, oh look, there's 50,000 scripts. I've clearly done something terribly wrong.
All right. So
that's actually not uncommon in Skyrim. That kind of
to have 50,000 scripts. Are you talking about like the scripted instances items, or are you talking about active scripts, like where there's actually queued scripts ready to go in the hopper?
Yeah, in Skyrim, especially if you had a Dindulad installed, when you change cell and you look at an autosave, they're 50 to 100,000 active scripts, and they all terminate a second later. But in that autosave, sure enough, and I think that's one of the reasons autosaves have gotten a reputation for being very buggy. Not that there's anything inherently wrong with them, but so much is happening at a cell change.
Yeah, absolutely, and especially I think it's one of those things. So many of us who are doing system-based mods tend to rely on that as a good trigger to know like that the player is doing something without having to rely on just looping. Like in Fallout, we can at least loop timers, which is nice. But in Skyrim, all you can do is loop on the frame. So like that's very intensive. So using events like the location change is a lot safer in that regard and makes it fire less frequently. But when you have every mod using that same trick, then it's like it's almost the number of scripted mods you have become a liability.
Yeah.
I've especially noticed it with people who when they start getting the first thing I tell people when they start getting the save corruption or the problem with the game crashing after they cross the cell boundary, or when they do, if it's always in this particular instance, it's like turn off those autosaves, and half the time that fixes the problem for them, because the autosave, I don't know why the hard save works so much better than the autosave, and maybe it's just coincidental, maybe it's just a matter of, because sometimes I've also seen where just the moment you happen to hit the save button can make a difference, because if more or less scripts had finished processing, it can make it easier for the game to save. Does that seem like a realistic assumption to make, or am I just talking out of my ass here?
No, I think it's definitely realistic. I think the impression I've gotten is that there are some race conditions in the part of the engine that handles saving and loading.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've seen cases where a crash went away just by moving the save game directory onto an SSD so that they load faster.
Ah, okay, that makes sense.
And then suddenly there's no crash anymore. And
yeah,
my impression, and it's the same with if there's too many save files in the directory. The extra time just to get through and find the right one can seem to sometimes cause crashes.
oh man.
And just when people go and delete all their unused saves from like 20 levels ago, suddenly
Right.
they don't have a problem.
Huh. That one I've never heard. That's a good one to try because it doesn't cost anything. Like to move, like even if you just temporarily move all your save files into a backup directory. And I actually I do that periodically anyway, just because I get tired of looking at all my test saves, and when I'm trying to just quickly loop through. So I have probably like 6 or 8 backup folders in my save folder where I have just like one day I'm just like, all right, dump it all in there. If we need them, they're there, but most likely I won't need them. And that way I just have my one save file left for quick testing loading. And it probably has saved me because I probably have 1,000 save files on my computer because I'm a hoarder. But they're all in subdirectories, and that probably is why I haven't run into that as an issue. But it's probably also saved me some headache, and I didn't realize it. So that's pretty awesome to know. And a good troubleshooting tip I can start giving out to people.
Yeah, some of these, I mean, they come up in Skyrim and not Fallout. Some of them come up in Skyrim and Skyrim Special Edition, but yeah, there's not a lot of consistency, it seems, in the kinds of bugs that happen between those 3 games.
Right.
But so that does make it harder to guess why someone's having a problem.
Sure. Yeah, well, it's good to have anything like that where we've just got information about how it works and we can try things even between the games where maybe it's not exact. It's still nice to have some more stuff to try because people get desperate. When if you got 200 or 300 hours sunk into something and you were planning on playing it for a lot longer, it's pretty. I think if people knew, I think when people start experiencing that, so if they start experiencing these corrupt saves, I think it makes them pull back from the game in general. It's just like, all right, well now I don't know if because it makes it's almost like an investment of themselves when they're putting in that much time. So then, they start hitting those corrupt saves, and it just kind of wears away your will to play the game anymore. And so I think like
absolutely.
having that happen can just sour people permanently from the game, or at least to the point where they're like, all right, I got to take a year off or whatever it is. So I don't ever want to be responsible for that, and I love to be able to help people whenever I can because I can sense the investment because I think I do the same thing you do. I love to start games with the plan of going really long with them, and then inevitably it's like the 30 hours in, I'm like, oh, I kind of want to try that mod now, or now I kind of want to try it where I put more points into stealth or whatever, where it ends up being I just end up constantly looping through new characters when I get into the mode of trying to play a new game. But again, I can plan it out in my head of like what it's going to look like to play 300 hours, and then if I put myself in the shoes of the guy who's doing it, I just feel terrible whenever they tell me about these corruptions. So it's been your editor has been the closest we've had as a surgery tool. So you essentially took 2 tools that other people in the community had done, merged them together, updated them to work with knowing this new limitation of the save file format with the crash fixer. And then what did you throw in there on top of that? Because I assume you've been developing it for a while. I assume there's a lot more stuff you've put in there yourself.
Yeah, one big thing, since I already had all this code for reading in scripts, and the script rewriter, it also had to scan the actual plugin files to make sure it wasn't changing something that a plugin file needed, because plugins, I mean, they will access properties, and so I had to make sure you could only change it would only rewrite a property name if that property never got used in a script in a plugin. So I had all of this infrastructure.
Okay.
So I decided to throw in this thing to parse all the plugins and use that to provide extra context information about things in the save file. I have no idea if anyone other than myself ever actually uses that feature, but I really like it because sometimes there's things in scripts in a script that's been replaced by a mod,
Okay.
and this can help catch that.
Oh,
Because
that's really interesting. How so? Walk me through how you would do something like that, because I almost exclusively use it for active script management. But I'm sure people would love to know if there's more useful things they can do, and that right there sounds incredibly useful to figure out, because I see that all the time when, especially with Workshop Framework now, where I've replaced a lot of the workshop scripts. So it's it's an ESM, which means that it has to be top of the load order or up there pretty high. That I'm constantly running into the issue of little tiny mods not knowing any better, either include the vanilla copy of one of the workshop scripts or write their own, not realizing the problems they're going to cause. So it would be awesome to be able to scan and quickly figure that out. So how do we do that? How do we do that with your tool?
The best way to make it work is to be using Mod Organizer 1 or 2, because then it gives you this extra feature that mods are all consigned to the individual directories.
Okay.
And then you activate this parse plugins. It'll ask you where Mod Organizer is if you've checked the integrate with Mod Organizer box.
Okay.
It'll scan all those directories, scan all the scripts in each directory, the plugins, the archives, and build this picture of where everything is actually coming from. And so then when you click on a script instance, it can try to give you this information that this is probably from this mod, based on the ordering of all the mods in Mod Organizer, what has the highest priority.
Okay.
And yeah, there was a bug in Skyrim that I was trying to track down, and it turned out to be from the 4 different mods were replacing the mining script.
Oh man.
And all trying to do different things with it.
Oh geez. So yeah, that would lead, and those are hard to resolve. But at least if you have an idea which mods they are. Okay, yeah, I just found the tool, so it's right on the file menu. So anybody who wants to try this out. And if you don't integrate with Mod Organizer, I don't ever use Mod Organizer. So I'm using Vortex and Nexus for different projects. What can you expect from the parser if you don't use Mod Organizer? Does it still work? It's just gonna go through everything in your directory?
Yeah, it'll go through everything in the game directory, so it'll still scan all the plugins.
Okay.
And where that can be really useful is when you're looking at things like when you're looking through all the different save game elements on the left side in the tree. It adds names to a lot of things because it reads the editor IDs.
Oh, that's really helpful.
Yeah, and none of that information is in the save file natively.
Right, and nor should it be. That would bloat the hell out of it.
Oh yeah, but it's all there for
that's a fantastic tool then. Oh my god, I feel like you've just opened up possibilities here. Just having the damn editor IDs on stuff would be a lifesaver, because trying to look up stuff by the form IDs is a real pain in the butt in the especially in like Xedit. Like you'd have to individually do it for each one. I mean, in Creation Kit, it's got a pretty simple filter system, but that's slow as hell. So
yeah, and that came up from trying to fix the gray face bug in Skyrim. People would always want to delete the change form for an NPC who's had gotten the gray face bug, and they'd say, "Oh, what do I delete?" It's like, I don't know which change form corresponds to Lydia.
Right.
So I added this so you could just type Lydia into the search box.
Oh, that's so perfect. Oh, that's really cool. So what other secret tools do you have built into there? There's got to be more. There's a lot of stuff on the menus that I don't use. I assume it's there for a reason.
I recently added a history, which I think it goes back 20 items. So when you click links to, say, from a script instance to jump to its script, now you can click back and go back to where you were.
That's nice.
And and it's just a little quality of life feature that I'd never added, but 6 months ago I finally did, and I think it's pretty sharp.
Sure. Yeah, because it can get hard to remember what you were doing in there, and you're just trying to quickly go check something. Yeah, that's a great feature. Another one I did not know about. I know there's like a batch menu that has a bunch of cleaning tools. I tend to find those are more dangerous than not. Is that expected behavior, that it can often lead to an unstable save?
Yeah, that goes back to Skyrim, where 90% of the problems people had were fixable by removing unattached instances. So when you removed a mod, it left behind script instances that weren't attached to a script anymore. And
Okay.
if you just deleted all of those, you were good.
Sure.
But in Fallout, uh, the Fallout version of Papyrus allows you to do those naturally, not just as a bug. And so there's certain mods that will just be broken if you do this cleaning action.
Got it. Yeah, that makes total sense then, because that's pretty much what I always see when people tell me I did the cleaning of unattached instances. It's like I don't think you're supposed to do that for Fallout, because
Yeah,
I've never had it go successfully, so I just leave them, and they seem to be
yeah,
fine. It doesn't seem to be causing any particular issues, but it's like that desperation thing. People are just gonna try anything. So
yeah. So like I'm looking at a brand new save that I was working on this morning, and there's
okay,
two unattached instances, and, and that's without uninstalling any mods.
sure. So it's a native
Yeah,
feature of Papyrus in Fallout 4.
yeah. But on the other hand, if you uninstall a mod, you will get a whole bunch of unattached instances that are causing problems. And
Aha.
that's the big thing that comes up with Fallout 4 is like how to fix this.
Right.
And to this day I've never been able to find a way to distinguish between uh, unattached instances that are left behind, that are orphans, and ones that are
Right.
deliberate.
Would it be possible? It would be an advanced tool, an advanced users tool. But if you allow them to say, I don't know if there's any way you could do this, maybe with some sort of like text file externally. If a person could load your software and then have a tool that's like mark all unattached instances as safe or something. Then they go in the game, uninstall the mod, load it, and make a new save without it. And then your tool could use that other document it had created and use that to help with the comparison. Is that something that could be feasible, or do they change so many? Do all of those instances change location and markers in memory to where it wouldn't be useful?
Well, the deliberate ones, uh,
Mm-hmm.
they're really generic. They don't have a whole lot to distinguish them.
Okay.
Like there'll be
But
things
I
like
guess
input layer.
do they have the exact same location in the file every time? So right, let's say that file you just talked about this morning that has two unattached instances. If you go through and play some more, make more saves, etc., will those two unattached instances always exist and always exist at the exact same point in the file, or do they get moved around and overwritten, etc.? Or have you not checked that?
As far as I know, those two will stay the same. And the
Okay.
last time I did a long playthrough of Fallout, I mean, I
Right.
tracked ended up with five that were consistently there.
Okay.
Uh, but I mean, but they do sometimes change.
Okay.
Uh, One mod in particular that seems to do this a bit is Journey,
Okay,
which I don't know
that's
if you've
actually
used
one
it.
I hear. I haven't used Journey, but I do get a lot of people telling me that after removing Journey, their game stabilized. So I don't. I'm
Hmm,
not sure what that mod's doing that would be causing such a thing. Because if I understand correctly, Journey is mostly about immersive fast travel options, right?
that's right.
Or am I? Yeah. So I don't know how that could be causing anything particularly odd. It would really just be calling, like player move to options, and then I assume it has some sort of cost or something involved with it. I'm not, again, I haven't played it, so I don't know. I just have read the description, but that's one that constantly comes up in conversations with people when they're trying to sort out save file issues. That turns out to be a problem for them.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never heard that, but
Hmm.
it does create an unattached instance that if you clean those, Journey breaks.
Weird. Huh. So you can't even. So even if we were talking about coming up with a system to like isolate out the one where the player or the user could say, all right, I know for a fact these unattached instances need to stay. They're from the base game, and then in the future runs you could use that information. That sounds like you couldn't even do that because of mods like Journey, where that's a wild card into that mix that would then make it so that even the batch file excluding the vanilla ones wouldn't be safe to use.
Yeah, what I usually tell people is rather than just uninstalling a mod and then trying to clean later
Mm-hmm.
when there's problems,
Right.
if you delete all the instances for the mod before you uninstall it, they'll still be easy to pick out.
Ah,
And, I,
okay.
and, I, and I even have uh, a bit of a system for that, where you can right-click on a mod or on a plugin in Resaver and choose delete plugin change forms, delete plugin script instances.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And because when the mod's still there, they're not orphans, so they're a lot easier to find.
Sure. And now is
And
doing that safe? So if you do that, will the game always reload, or is that a you don't know, and that's why you'd make save backups?
it's safer. I would never.
Okay.
Nothing Resaver does is safe.
Sure. Hence the
Like,
warnings when you load it up.
yeah. Uh, it can destroy your save file with startling efficiency.
Oh, I still count on it. Like I had I had found a bug in the unofficial patch that was causing an infinite loop, and I had contacted Arthmore and suggested like, hey, like you've got this bug in here. You guys are gonna want to hotfix that. If you want to advise your users on how to fix it, you can do it with Resaver. And he's like, I don't know if I want to be recommending that tool to my users when it specifically says that it's not safe all the time. I was like, yeah, I just go for it because it's better than telling people. Because the alternative is, in my opinion, to saying try Resaver to fix it is to say, sorry, I screwed you. You're out of luck. You have no options. So I always felt like this is, a tool that's experimental is better than no tool.
Yeah, I guess it's just that it's a bit of an expert tool. I mean,
Sure.
like you have to have some knowledge of what you're doing generally.
Right.
And there's a handful of cases where it it just doesn't work right. When
Right.
there's certain times, particularly in Fallout, where if a quest is being updated, Resaver won't even load that save.
Oh,
And
interesting.
I've been trying to get enough save files that have this happening that I can analyze it, but and
Now,
the
what
particular
is
data structure.
what does it look like to user? Because we might be able to score you some save files here. What does it look like when the player tries to load that file in? Because one of the most common ones I've seen when trying to load where it fails to, it'll say something like it can't load the script data. Is it that, or is there a different message it would give you when it tries to load?
Probably a message like that,
Okay.
because to Resaver it looks like it's just hit a block of random data. It doesn't know what to do, and it just craps out.
So if anybody had a save file where Resaver fails to open it, you would like to those would be useful to you?
Oh, always, yes.
Awesome. Do you have some way for people to send those to you? Would you like them to maybe send you a link to a shared Google Drive file through Nexus Mods, or do you have an email address you wouldn't mind giving out, or how would you like people to get those to you? Because we might be able to help you with that.
I typically get people to they send me a private message on Nexus, and with
Okay.
a Dropbox links or a Google Docs links,
Perfect.
or
So anybody out there, if you have a save file, it won't load in Resaver. If you look up MarkDF on Nexus and send it to him, he is looking for those. So there, maybe we'll get you some more data there. I'll definitely start sending those to you. I do run into them periodically. What I find that always tends to fix them is just waiting for a little longer. But that's probably what you're talking about, where it's if the quest is in the middle of updating, it fails. But if I load back into the game and wait a few seconds, then that quest probably finished updating. Is that likely what's happening?
yep, that is exactly it. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Okay, well then that's what I've been advising people, so that's good to know. I love how this is all clicking now. I'm getting. It sounds like it feels like I've been getting really lucky with all of my troubleshooting I tell people to do, and it just happens to be the correct way to do it. So that's awesome.
Well, that's exactly how my troubleshooting tends to go too. I mean, people send me a save file, and often it's not obvious exactly what's wrong, and I'll look at the plugin list and be like, "Have you tried taking out this plugin?" And sure enough, quite often it seems to work.
Yeah.
The worst one
That's
is was Skybirds in Skyrim, which
Skybirds. I don't think I've ever even heard of that one. What is that?
it adds small birds to Skyrim.
Oh, as
Like
simple as that.
little
Okay.
little pigeons and things that sit around.
Sure.
And about a quarter of all the original Skyrim save games that I got sent for fixing had Skybirds installed, and getting rid of it seemed to quite often fix the problem.
Too
Yeah.
many scripted birds.
Yeah, and I think they fixed it for Skyrim SE, but
It's still a problem for original. Well, I'll
yeah,
have to keep that one in mind. It's gonna. Oh man, I haven't played Skyrim in so long. Once I'm ready to do so again, it's gonna be quite the feat because there's so many mods for it. Holy crap! There's like, I mean, I have trouble parsing through and picking out enough, what to play with Fallout. And I play that game every day in some form, if it's testing or whatnot. But Skyrim, man, there's more than double the mods that are available for Fallout 4 out there, and there's a hell of a lot more high quality ones too to choose from.
yeah, and even the original Skyrim, people are still very actively modding it.
Right, like making new mods for it, not even just
Yeah.
yeah. Because because I'm sure SE is Special Edition is way behind on a number of mods from the original. Because not
Yeah.
most of them didn't get ported.
And it seems like people are still developing mods for the original first, and then porting them over if there's interest.
Huh. That's probably a good way to do it because you guarantee everybody has the original one, but not nearly as many are going to have switched over.
And even the authors who said like, oh, I'm just going to switch over to SE since that's where the action's at, but they seem to all go back and start doing it up for Legendary anyway.
Huh. Interesting. So the file format is pretty much identical for the save files then, aside from whatever new data that Fallout 4 needs. Is that accurate, or did you have to write? Are there quite a bit of differences in the way it has to load the files?
It was all small differences. Fallout 4 was in particular a challenge because it was a moving target.
Okay.
It started off very similar, and Fallout 4 originally had that same string table bug as Skyrim. But Bethesda actually did their own fix for it.
Okay.
And that changed a lot of little things in the save file. Then they added the lightweight plugins. Yeah. That added this whole extra table of plugins. And
right.
I mean, it was nothing like terribly difficult. And Flex Creator had already done some of the work.
Sure.
It was just staying on top of it.
You're standing on the shoulder of Flex the Giant, is what you're saying.
Absolutely, yeah. As well as on my original plan was just like, oh, I don't care about Fallout 4. I'm a Skyrim man. But a fan who really, really wanted it to work for Fallout 4 bought me a copy and sent me the Steam code for it.
Oh, that's
awesome. At that point, I didn't really have much of a choice.
That's all it takes? Just bribe you with a $60 game? Oh, man. I got some projects for you, buddy.
I work cheap.
Well, we're so happy you did it, and it's fortunate that the games have such similar formats to them. And then it's also awesome to see that Bethesda did that, because that's not the only change they actually made to Fallout 4 post-launch to help with modding. One of the things they did was they took away the keyword limitation. So like there was a mod called Settlement Keywords Expanded that was put out right away, and it was like going to be a must-have thing. Same with AWKCR, because there was a hard limit to the number of keywords, and so we needed to make sure that all these different mods were using these framework mods so that we could, keep in mind the cap. And then it turned out they went through and removed that. They also went through and added the ability for functions that collect object references to return arrays larger than 128 so that we can count on collecting all of the relevant references. Like, they did a lot of changes that as far as I can tell, they did them just to help the modding community, which is pretty awesome. There's also the chance they did it because they needed it for their DLC. But I'm going to choose to believe that Bethesda is super pro-modder and they just wanted to help us out. But it's cool to see them doing stuff like that. So they fixed that problem, so you didn't need to. Or is that something that you would have solved? So that you said you came to that problem in Skyrim. You had your hacky solution. Once you saw the solution that actually ended up working with crash fixes, was that something that you might have come to eventually, or was that totally left field for you?
No, the way the crash fixes solution, I mean, it required someone who knew how to, load the game into an actual debugger, go through the assembly code, and like the kind of stuff that the people who work on the script extender do.
Right. Basically, you have to be a hacker, essentially.
Yeah.
That's outside of your skill set.
Yeah, I've never learned to do that particular thing.
I've tried several times, and it's just so beyond me because I've never learned assembly. So I don't, I have to learn that I feel like I have to learn that to start, and then there's so much trial and error involved with it, even once you know what you're doing. Because I've read lots of guides and tutorials on how you learn to be, to debug code without having the, I'm trying to think of the name of there's a file that like devs have when they're debugging that basically explains the code in more plain English for you, and I can't remember what it's called, but without that, you know what I'm talking about? Scaffolding or something. I can't remember what it's called, but anyway, without that, trying to learn to debug, like even the guides I've read are like, it's an art more than a science. Like, ugh, that's rough. Because then it's just hours. It's literally just putting hours in it so that you learn to recognize patterns and can go through it a little more quickly.
Yeah, and we're pretty lucky to have people like the people that work on F4SE and SKSE. Like,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
amazing that those people exist,
yeah,
and that they keep supporting it to this day. Like once Bethesda decided to do Creation Club and start breaking the EXEs all the time, the fact that these teams are still going at it and continue to put out those updates for us, and they do it really quickly too. I mean, they have those updates out within 24 hours after a patch hits. It's
yeah.
very awesome.
A lot of people would give up over a lot less.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm actually and almost out of protest, you'd think that they would have done it by now to just be like, because I think unless maybe they're pro Creation Club or okay with it rather. Like I'm okay with it. Like I don't tend to purchase a lot of it because I think it's a little overpriced. I just wait for the stuff to be given away for free or go down to like 50 cents or whatever. Like when it goes down so cheap, where it's like, all right, I might as well. But there's a lot of people in the community who are just like hardline no, they don't want anything to do with it. They don't even like hearing people talk about it. Like I get inevitably whenever I bring it up in one of these, there's always a comment that's like, never talk about Creation Club. It's evil. I was like, all right.
Goodness.
Yeah.
I mean,
People get aggro about it. Well, it's part of the culture in gaming right now. Is there's so much money grabbing going on with these big companies between the microtransactions and the software as a service model that I think people are just like, they feel like they're being what's the word, predated. Is that how you say that?
yeah,
They're being assaulted for their every last dollar.
yeah. I started off in that camp, but when they started putting out mods from modders that I really respected, like Eleonora,
Right.
that kind of changed my thinking on it.
Okay.
And and then I saw that yeah, they were dropping them down to 50 cents or free, and that yeah, my heart grew 3 sizes, and I kind of embraced Creation Club at that point.
Yeah, I've gotten a much bigger pool than I anticipated because when I saw the prices when they first released, I was like, I don't think so. Like that's absurd. But now I've got quite the pool of them. Mostly, I tend to grab ones that I want to integrate with Sim Settlements. So like all of the workshop ones, and then I ended up grabbing all the
Yeah,
dogs because I'm like, oh, I can grab all those form IDs and integrate those with our pet summoning list. Like, why not? Those would be cool if the settlers can show up with a Labrador instead of a mutant, those creepy, those weirdo looking junkyard dogs. So it's slowly grabbing me. There's still some of them where I'm like, I don't know about that. Like the AI, the Sentinel AI one is like $8, I think. I'm like, ugh, that's a little
yeah,
steep. But yeah, it is cool to see those names that there's actually like that Bethesda is embracing certain modders and paying them to do their work. Like I think we would all agree we would love to see some of those mod authors just like if that was their career. Like if all they did, if they could make the full year's salary or like a full-time job just pumping out awesome mods, like that would be cool to see.
it absolutely, yeah,
So I think that's as close as we're gonna get though, because I've watched. It's a shame that I've always we jumped onto Patreon recently with the Sim Settlements team to just basically to try and fund the development to take on not in paying anybody's salary or anything, but we replace broken hardware for people occasionally. We buy software that somebody needs that in order to do the standards or pay for web servers and like all those random little things. And it's a shame you never see those Patreons for individual creators get big enough to support them in the community, because the community is big enough. But like if I look at like Eleonora or Fading Signal or some of the bigger modders out there who have been doing this for many years, is like they never, you can tell they're not going to make enough to get a living off of crowdfunding. But it seems like there's enough of us who use their mods where it's like if we all gave $1 to that person, we could easily fund their living becoming a full-time modder. But
yeah.
it's a pipe dream,
I
I
mean,
guess.
I'm a bit guilty of that myself. I haven't donated a whole lot. I donated a bit to the Xedit team because like I live and die by that program.
Yeah, I donate them the most. Like I donate them a ton because I'm just like this. Like the whole modding scene couldn't exist without them.
Yeah,
It's super awesome that Elminster came back. Elminster came back to take over the development of that because it had been in good hands, and the guys who were taking it on were adding new features all the time and making sure that it worked with the latest versions. But that software is so complex. I mean, it's handling low level file stuff. It's got a Pascal script engine in it. Like, it's a pretty complex piece of software. And so I think there are certain pieces of software. I don't know about you, but when I write a piece of software, it's very unlikely that anybody else is going to be able to work with it as well as I can, because my mind works one way in coding, and it's questionable always whether or not I put a proper number of comments in my code. So I imagine that's the case for most coders.
Yeah, like I've had people ask for the source code to Resaver, and at which point I point out that it's actually I include it in the archive,
Right.
and no one's ever asked a follow-up question. So I think most people look at it and they go pale and give up.
Yeah, it can be pretty intimidating to look at other people's source code, especially when, and it's funny, it's as people get better at coding, it actually becomes a worse problem, because then we start abstracting things more and more, and like wrapping your head around somebody else's abstraction is always kind of a nightmare, in my opinion. It's
yeah, exactly.
Like a lot of the like when I have to work with other people's, because I do a lot of web development IRL, and when I have to learn new frameworks and stuff, it's always like, man, the way this team thinks is not how I think at all. I'm just not a fan of digging through this. And I get it that there's certain things where if you want to you almost get to a point when you understand all coding enough, you're like, all right, perfect coding is perfect abstraction. But it's like at some point you take it too far. Like you can, I had this conversation with Scrivener, who's a big coder in the Fallout 4 scene, about how it's so tempting always to abstract perfectly, but you get it out to a certain level and then it just becomes annoying for you too, where you're just like, well, I don't want to have to build all of the actual stuff that uses my abstraction now, because it's too much work.
Yeah, though I think one of the most embarrassing things in coding is when you're looking at some code and you're like, this is terrible. Who wrote this? Oh, right, me a year ago.
That's why I comment a lot now, is because I find that I want to be able to yell at myself. Like, I want to be like, past Gath, you're an idiot, and know why I was an idiot, so I can at least read through my thought process and be like, wow, that was stupid. Whereas if I have no notes, then I have not only do I not get to call, or I can call myself stupid, but I can't even figure it out to fix it, because it's such a mess by comparison if I actually have some notes to get through it. So I probably over comment a lot of the time, just because because it's for me. It's like I don't care about anybody else seeing it. I just want to be able to come back in a year and actually like muddle my way through this stuff. So that's the coder's curse. I think you get better, and it doesn't change the fact that your code's always a little bit hard to follow if you step away from it for long enough, or if you pass it off to somebody else. Now, do you code professionally, I assume?
No, I don't.
Really? Okay.
I mean, I started off in school for computer science.
Okay.
But I ended up looking at things like web development, and I don't know. I just found that I couldn't do it.
Doesn't draw you in, or?
Yeah. I mean, I started programming when I was 10 years old.
Okay.
As a hobby, and it's something I love doing. And
sure.
The way it's done professionally, I found takes everything that I took joy in about it was just gone. And and at that point I was 22 and idealistic, so I was like, screw this, and went into science instead.
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the things with professional coding is, especially if you're not working solo. Like, I do a lot of my stuff solo, so it's not as that's probably why I still get the joy out of it. But I think a lot of the soul sucking is to deal with that problem I was just talking about not being able to understand each other's code. Is when you're working on a team coding something, you all have to agree on some standards and work within the same framework, and so that tends to slow things down, and you build things out more. What would I say? Like more structured and deliberate, as opposed to. And I know there are there's Scrum and Agile to try and speed that along, but I think there are limitations to that on a team level. Whereas when you're coding for fun, you just get to kind of like just solve problems. You just solve problems as quickly as you can, and then you maybe roll back and clean it up a little bit after the fact. And that's the joy to me. I get that. Would that be accurate for you as well? It's just
exactly.
It's just a way to solve problems. Just pull out that hammer and get her done.
Yeah, and when you're doing it, when you're in the zone with it, it's almost euphoric.
Yeah, I'd agree. It feels so good. Yeah, you can get into that flow once you're once you're solving problems and making progress. It feels real good. Which is probably why I think that's why it's so frustrating to work on the save files. Like when we were trying to tackle the change form data, it was like, and you did way more than I did, but I did definitely poke my head in to try and help you because this is so important. And like I couldn't get a flow going at all. It's so difficult to wrap your head around it, and like there's so many unknown variables that it really is just work. It's not there's no joy in it at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, one day maybe. Like I think that tool you were starting down the road of, I think with the being able to just kind of mouse over the hex to have the computer scan for common patterns that exist in the save files, I think could be huge. I imagine it almost like you could design it like a game of Minesweeper, where you scan over, it shows you, and then as soon as you find one that looks good, you could like maybe lock it into place, like right click to lock it in, and then just keep doing that or something like that. Like imagine you could almost turn it into a game.
Yeah, and break it down into fields like okay, this is a string, integer, float, integer.
Right. You know, what could those 8 fields combine to make? Captain Planet. I'm imagining it'll be more entertaining once you've got some sort of tool like that, because that will be like I think that'll be the holy grail of your software, is being able to clean even if it were just something like the tool to revert a cell to vanilla, or like if that's all it could do. Like I think that could be huge, especially for workshops, because people put so much, like the settlement system really changed the way people approach a Bethesda game, because now you're not only invested in your character, you get to invest in the world itself. And that is where the game tends to be the most prone to corrupt, is in settlements. It's like once you exceed a certain number of items, it's almost inevitable, because there's all these different items with their events popping all the time, and just the fact that the engine seems to struggle to load beyond a certain number of textures depending on which video card and drivers you have. So there are so many potential pitfalls with that, but that's also where people put in so much time. And like obviously with Sim Settlements, we've eliminated a lot of that time, but still, I've seen people who've put in clearly, dozens of hours into a single design, if not hundreds. For some of the ones, if you look on YouTube or look in some of the screenshot sections of people showing off their settlements, it's clear that they have put in just unbelievable amounts of time, and like it's like an artist tool to them. So to have those get corrupt is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
But one of the things, let me know what you think about this. So I had an idea of one way we might be able to tackle this problem, is if we were to take you probably know this stuff better, but if we were to take a save file, go visit each settlement with AI disabled, and simply go up to the workbench and take control of it so that it flags a change. So then we would have a save file that literally just had a clean version of each of the workshops. Could that data then be used to like paste into save files in the future? Is that a feasible thing? Like, or am I not understanding this so completely that that this sounds stupid to you?
I don't see why you couldn't do that.
I'm just like outside the box solutions to try and give ways for people to like attempt to bring things back to normal, just because it's, like I said, it's such a heartbreaking thing to have happen.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that adds a bit of extra complexity is that a lot of what's in the cell isn't just the cell. It's all of the things in it, all the statics and furniture and
right. So you almost have to clear those out as well.
But if we deciphered enough of the refer change form,
right,
to just tell which ones are in that cell, then they could all be updated as well.
Now, is that feasible based on the tools you have right now? Is that easy to figure out? Because I know you've got that, because that parsing, like the fact that you told me you have that and described how it works, tells me that you do have some sort of information available on these change forms, like that you can slowly start, either certain things you can figure out. So like if you're able to tag on editor IDs onto things, then there's maybe more information there than I'm accustomed to, and that kind of opens up some doors there.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time the easiest way to get something to vanilla is to just delete it from the save file.
Okay.
Because a change form is literally that, is the changes to that form. The original is still in.
So in a sense, the save files work very much like the plugins do, because the plugins are essentially a list of changes to the vanilla ESM.
Yeah, and the save file is a list of changes to to both
to
of
your
those.
whole load order. Right. Wow. Okay. So that makes sense. That would make sense. That's how I would do it too if I were Bethesda, of just trying to like let's use the. In fact, I bet there's a lot of overlap between data structures between the ESP format and the save files. Have you found that to be the truth or the case?
A fair bit. There's
Okay.
some things that are bafflingly different,
Huh.
like in terms just like the way strings are laid out and little things like that. But a lot of things are also the same.
Now, how much of that is due to the difference between going from 32-bit to 64-bit? Because I know there are some wonky things in the system that we had to deal with for our conversion tool to make city plans. In that, I can't remember exactly what it was, but there's a certain limitation we found where some of the fields that they use for script properties are like there's a it's almost like two fields get stitched together to make one field. It's very strange, and I'm butchering the explanation. I would need to have Vairnus talk about it to say it better. In fact, he did on my podcast already, mentioned that, and I keep butchering it every time he tells me it. But it's essentially there's these. It's almost like the going from like integer to big integer in certain languages where there's some limitation. And they've just like hacked that into their ESP files.
Yeah, there's I think there's the VS vals, I think they're called,
Okay.
where the first 2 bits tells you how long the rest of the number is going to be.
Right.
So the file format doesn't have to specify whether it's 8 or 16 or 32 bits.
Right.
You just have this flexible number that can be.
Oh, and that's because most of the numbers, it's basically the first 2 bits are just like whether it's going to be a float or an int32 or a bool or whatever. But that is one where it's okay. The next the next number is going to, or the next digits are going to tell you what the number's what type of number it might be.
Yeah, like in this case specifically, how big it's going to be.
Right. So that's how strings usually work. So it's strange that they don't just store it as a string instead.
Yeah,
Huh.
and so
Interesting.
and some of the strings are 0 terminated, and some are prefixed with the length. The length can sometimes be.
Yeah, we found that out the hard way. That
Yeah.
was many a broken files, generating ESP files. So the saves do the same thing where there's a mix.
Yeah,
Oh man, come on, Bethesda, what are you doing? I wonder. When you see stuff like that, you just got to wonder if it's a matter of they were doing it one way before, and they're like, all right, actually we should have been doing it this way, but it's going to be too much work to go retro fix it for the old thing, so they just leave it. Or is it? I mean, that's got to be it, right? Because why would you do something so wonky and so different for essentially the same thing, the same data storage?
yeah. I think some of this stuff is still hanging around from Morrowind.
Right.
Maybe even before.
Right. And I get why they would do that, because it's the same idea. I think as a programmer, we tend to try and disconnect ourselves from the actual subject so that we can reuse our code. And you would think you'd want to do that at the same thing of a game engine level, is you'd want to, as much as possible, just keep rebuilding on top of what you're building so that you're not reinventing the wheel from scratch every time. Because man, it would take forever to get to Fallout 4 from scratch. But if you've got the physics handled, you've got the animation system handled, you've got you've got each of these individual systems already handled, even if it's archaic code, it generally works. So you can build on that rather than having to go back to the beginning. So I understand why they do that. It's just it's so ugly to see looking at it behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And it probably is part of the reason for all these random, unexplainable problems.
Yeah.
It's like building your house on a foundation of sand thing. Like you're inevitably going to run into more issues that way.
Yeah. On the other hand, I mean, the fact that it didn't take them 10 years to build a game of this complexity is great, and I think that's why it's one of such a heavily modded game.
Right. Yeah, it blows my mind the way that this supports mods the way it does. I mean, dynamically loading loose files and the overwrite system of the ESPs, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean it's a big clunky mess, but that gives a lot of room for us to add our own mess.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we've got amazing people like the Xedit guys and F4SE guys and SKESE guys, like all those teams that are willing to, and like people coming up with the crash fixes, or you coming up with save file fixes. We've got all these amazing people in the community who go out of their way to help us fix the mess and make it run together better. And even beyond that, now we've got like Nexus investing in the new Vortex software. I know Elminster is not only is he writing F4SC, or I'm sorry, Xedit further. He's also like he's been pushing this idea he calls the method, which is like some new way to put together your load orders and ensure that they're perfect so they won't break your game. Like there's so many people doing all this work to let us just keep playing with these crazy messes of hundreds of mods and DLC and Creation Club content and all this stuff. It's pretty amazing to see this community come together to let each other bury ourselves in these worlds.
Yeah, it's a massive, like, loose collaboration.
Right. Oh, that's awesome.
Like,
I love being part of this community. So do you have any other tools? So I've seen you have a couple other tools listed on Nexus. I've never used any of them. What can you tell me about the other stuff you've done so far?
Oh, I'd have to look to actually see what I've put up there.
Here, I'll just read it off to you because I've got it open right now. So you have quite a few files, but the three that come up right now, you have Creation Club dummy ESLs and an FO4 log monitor.
Oh, so the log monitor was it was just a little PowerShell script that I put together to watch for stack dumps in the Papyrus logs.
Oh, okay.
When I was changing up my load order. And yeah, just so that I could go in, play for 10 minutes, and then hear this beeping sound as soon as it started dumping stacks.
Okay.
Yeah, just a simple little thing.
Sure. So it's just a great way to know when things have kind of gone off the rails. Because I often get people reporting like, oh, there's tons of stack dumps, your mod's breaking. It's like, oh, that doesn't necessarily mean it's breaking. It's just a matter of if that goes on for too long, then you're going to be in trouble. But because I believe Papyrus by default dumps as soon as it hits 100 threads. And it will suspend them and try to catch up with them in time. I believe that's how it works. Is that once it has free processing power within a frame, then it'll go through the suspended. But once it gets to a point where it knows it's never going to be able to catch up, then I think it crashes the game. And that's when it seems to be around 200 250 scripts on the stack, depending on their size and everything. It seems to dump out. And I don't know have you seen, is there a hard limit in the game engine's memory that it'll put toward Papyrus where it does force a crash, or is it arbitrary? Like what's the difference between a stack dump crash and a stack dump being fine?
I'm not sure. Just I think you are right. In Fallout 4, it's on the low side. I definitely don't think I've ever seen active scripts above 300. In Skyrim, yeah, I've seen 100,000.
That seems so ridiculous to me now, like having coded for Fallout 4 for so long.
Yeah, there's clearly something there's some deep differences in how Papyrus works in the two games.
Right.
Because that particular save, like, it's still loaded. Like,
right.
The complaint was that the guy was getting periodic crashes and bad performance.
Yeah. That would be hard. You'd have crashed many moons ago in Fallout 4 with that 10,000 active scripts. That's nuts. Because effectively that means 100,000. I mean, that effectively means that there were that many threads attempting to be created. Like, that's unbelievable. Because I would kill to have that if I had that kind of capability in Fallout 4, I could do some wizardry. Like, you want to see city plans go fast? Give me 10,000 threads, 100,000 threads. We'll do it all in 1 second.
Well, as I say, Shassan's Dindulad, which gives dynamic LOD for Skyrim,
right.
On a cell change would sometimes create 50,000, and they'd finish in under a second.
Yeah,
and it all worked beautifully.
Yeah, I think some of that is actually baked into Fallout 4, like the dynamic LOD mesh swapping and everything, so we don't need anything crazy like that. But yeah, I know that Papyrus is just way more powerful for Fallout 4. There's a lot more you can do. So likely at the lowest level, they've changed something dramatic in order to make it that kind of difference. Because 100,000 versus like 200 is a pretty hefty shift in numbers in the numbers game there. Like, that's exponential.
Yeah, and it does seem a lot more stable, and you could get away with a lot more in Fallout 4.
Right.
Like some of the things where people just uninstall mods at random in Fallout 4,
Yeah.
and it seems to work. In Skyrim, you could never do that. If you
Right.
just uninstalled a mod and didn't clean, like you you were you were shooting yourself in the head. Like,
Right. Yeah, it almost seems like I almost feel like they, and I wonder if they fixed that for SE or not. Like if Skyrim SSE is better in that regard of being able to uninstall mods, where they knew that inevitably players, once they got access to the mod screen, because that mod screen in the games completely changed the user base. Like there are so many more people using mods for both games because of that screen, that they knew the average person was going to just uninstall mods without thinking, and they probably wanted to be able to support that at some level. So maybe they put in the extra effort, knowing that that was their game plan for those games, was to get mods into them right within the game, that they maybe did some extra magic to make sure that it could handle it to some extent, to at least maybe for smaller mods, knowing that they're inevitably players are going to just, this is a new toy, they're going to just try it. And because I can tell they knew things were going to go terribly awry, because as soon as you go to the mod screen, before you even get to the sign in, you get a big warning that's like, Bethesda does not support your save. It's very easy to break saves with mods. Warning, 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 we're not responsible, etc. So it's clear they knew something was going to go on, but I wonder if you also don't want to give your users such a terrible experience. So
yeah,
it would seem to me that it would make sense that they would have put in an extra effort to allow uninstalling of mods, and thank God they did, because I've done it. I've uninstalled mods that are extra terrible just to keep going with my save file, because I didn't realize they were terrible until too late. So.
yeah. I mean, I definitely get a lot less people asking for help about Special Edition than I ever did for the original,
Mm-hmm.
and so yeah, it's either working a lot better or people just aren't asking for help anymore. I don't know which it is.
Right. Well, I think I don't know which one it is either. The place people go for help too probably changes based on who's active in the community at the time. I know we've made such an effort to be so helpful in the Sim Settlements community that I think a lot of people just come to us automatically with all their mod problems. So,
Yeah.
and what I think is, well, maybe the people who are on my support team will chime in now that we're having this conversation and be like, Gath, we hate it. Don't encourage people. But so far, it seems like people enjoy helping each other, and so I think when people find those types of communities, they'll go there. So maybe they found somebody else to help them instead of you, or
Yeah.
maybe there's secretly another safe game editor out there competing with you.
Well, that'd be nice. I'd love some competition.
Especially if you guys could share notes, share that source code.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see what other people have solved in that realm, because it does sound like if you were given the source, I assume that those people you got it from have moved on. They're no longer developing actively.
Yeah. Not that, as far as I know, they aren't working in the community anymore.
Mm-hmm. That seems to be a common thing. It's very rare that people. I was looking over this the other day to try. I was looking into different people I wanted to talk to on the podcast, and trying to find out which people made it who were major developers on Skyrim, who then came forward to Fallout 4. And it's a lot smaller number than I anticipated. So I would have assumed that once you're a hardcore popular modder in one game, you just keep going to game to game to game, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Instead, it seems to be that a lot of people burn out and leave. they're just done. And I don't know if that's just the nature of the game of life, of you get a project to the point of completion and you're just ready to move on. If it's kind of like how people quit MMOs or whatever, or sometimes it's just best to quit cold turkey because you're addicted, or if it's a toxic thing. I know that's a common complaint from mod authors, and I've seen some big ones disappear and leave. Essentially angry messages like, "You guys did this to me. I was so tired of the entitled people." I don't know, or a combination of all of the above, but I have noticed there's not a ton of the big modders from Oblivion didn't then just automatically become the big modders in Fallout 3 or Skyrim. There tends to be there was a cluster for each game that really pushed on that game, and then they moved on. And so I don't know. What is your perspective on that? Have you been following enough of these games to have an opinion in that regard, or have you seen enough of it?
I came to Oblivion pretty late, so I didn't really have a good sense of who was big there.
Sure.
But yeah, it does look like, I mean, there were a few core people that moved from Skyrim to Fallout 4,
Mm-hmm.
like Eleonora and Chesko and Arthmore.
Right.
But yeah, and a lot more seem to drop out.
Hmm. So, well, we're thankful you haven't dropped out yet. I appreciate that you're still developing the Fulcrum tools. So let's we were going to talk about something early on, and then I didn't want to get us segued, and then of course we segued all over the hell and back, and that's fine. But the script data limit. So when you asked me about that, I got excited because this has been one of those problems that Sim Settlements kind of created this problem because nobody else was doing anything with scripts like we were. So it wasn't even, I don't think anybody else would have discovered it if it weren't for the city plan thing. Now, we've kept it at bay by just doing as much optimization as we can, but I've already had a couple of people now, thanks to the city plan contest, have gotten back up where they're hit the limit again if they use all the Sim Settlements content. So you mentioned to me in a PM recently that you wanted to know more about that script data limit. So then you said you were considering making a basic utility that would scan through mods and calculate the limit, how close they were to the limit, so you could advise people on it. Does that sum it up good? Is that a good summary of what you were aiming for?
Yeah.
So do you think, I know you've said that so far in your tests that the tool doesn't match up perfectly with the results the conclusion I came to. And you said maybe it's a matter of it's missing some things, and it could also just be that my conclusion is incorrect and that I have the numbers wrong, or there's something else going on there that we've got to solve. Do you have any other so let's assume you get that working. Do you have any other ideas of how we can use that data to improve things, to improve that situation? Because ultimately, I think we'd all like to have we would like no limits is where we'd like to be.
I mean, I don't have any real idea how to make the limit go away or anything like that. But
Sure.
Knowing which mods in your load order are the ones that are using up the most of that window,
Right.
yeah, I think that'd be really helpful.
Right.
Like I just ran it on
decisions about what ones you want to keep then based on that information.
Yeah, so I just checked my last save game, and it says I've got 37.5 megabytes of script data.
Okay.
And then the top three things are Sim Settlements at 16, Sim Settlement City Plan Contest at 8.6, and then Fallout 4.esm at 1.9.
And you can see why Bethesda would think what's 64 megs, if that is what, or whatever it turns out to be, is plenty, because they're like, we built an entire game and only used 1.7.
Yeah.
Suck it, Bethesda. I can waste more data than you can. Yeah, that's not shocking to me that Sim Settlements has that much, because those the city plans, each of them use so much data because they have to hold the position, rotation, scale, and form ID for every single item in a city plan, and something like our sanctuary city plan is like 3,500 items or something like that. So you can do the math on that with 8 bits per number, or 8 bytes per number, or whatever it works out to be. And it adds up real fast when you do it in the thousands. So I think you're definitely going to find in those tests, it's always going to be some settlements that's pushing the limit, especially city plans in particular are pretty brutal. And that's one of the things where we want to continue to help people out with that script data limit, because I know we're going to be, for the time being, we will be the biggest culprit. But I think when people get a hold of the next project we're working on internally, and they see how fast our code is, I think more people are going to want to jump on the using script data. That's why I'm so interested in getting that resolved, is because I think when I show people some of the stuff you can pull off with storing a lot of information in script data to speed up code, that more people are going to want to get in on that for their mods. So anything we can do to help with the limit would be pretty huge. And that's why I was curious if you had thought of any other uses for this beyond that, aside from just making good decisions about your load order. So so right now, for example, is your scanner part of the Fulcrum tools where it's operating on the save files, or does it operate on your load order, like just looking at your plugins?
It could probably be adapted to look at your load order. Right now, what it does, it starts from your save file.
Okay.
To get a list of plugins from that, and then it looks for those plugins.
Got it. Okay. So it's the same thing. I mean, that's effectively what, because your load order that you're actively using is going to be whatever plugins are stored in your save file.
Yeah, but if you're in a position where you can't even get to making a save file because you're over the limit,
right?
It'd be better if I could just go straight to the load order.
Right. Can you grab the
So
plugins.txt file and just look for the asterisk to determine if that one's loaded?
I haven't tried yet, but I don't. How hard could it be?
Right, right. You can if you can dig into these giant save files. I think you can dig into a new line delimited text file. So it should be pretty easy.
Yeah,
Yeah, that to me seems like a good solution. But yeah, that would be incredibly useful to be able to just quickly look at your load order, see a sorted list of what's using up the most script data, and then make at least educated decisions on that. So yeah, I'm really hoping that somebody comes up with a way to deal with this, whether it be through F4SE. So at least, because one of the things with I constantly am worried about supporting Xbox players, but because they have this 2 gig limit that Bethesda imposes, it's unlikely most of them are ever going to run into the script data limit anyway, especially now that we've optimized our stuff. But for PC players, I mean, I know people who are using 500 mods. Like it's not hard to hit any of these arbitrary limitations.
yeah, we're always pushing it.
Yeah. So how many mods do you use on average in your either game, say Skyrim or whatever one would sound more impressive?
With Skyrim, I tend to float right around 250, so
Okay.
staying just under the line.
Yeah.
With Fallout 4, because I use Dacel's item sorting, so I've got a lot of patches for that.
Yeah.
So I think comes in at a total of around 500.
Wow. That's
And
impressive. No wonder you need a
yeah,
save editor.
yeah,
Oh man.
and yeah, I even ran into the BA2 limit, which is you don't
Really?
hear
What's
much
the
about that one.
BA2 limit? Yeah, I've never heard of that.
Oh, the engine. It seems to after when you get to around maybe it's 256 or 500 archives,
Yeah.
it just starts crashing as soon as you start it up.
Really? Okay.
And
So is this probably another one of those things where they've arbitrarily got some index number set with a smaller number of bits than they need?
probably, yeah. And it came up because a bunch of the skin packs on Creation Club were free,
Right.
so I kept just grabbing them because why not?
Sure.
And at that point I had around there were like hundreds and hundreds of archives. And eventually I finally hit this limit, and I went through a huge debugging process trying to figure out why I was crashing. Eventually it just turned out one of the ways you know you're at a resource limit,
Mm-hmm.
I find, is that you disable a mod and suddenly it works. You turn it back on, disable a different mod, and suddenly it works. And it doesn't seem to
Right.
matter what you disable. Just disable anything and suddenly it works.
Yeah.
That means you're just running out of something.
Right.
And so I got rid of all these skin packs and suddenly it worked.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I bet those skin
So
packs would be a good thing. Right? Like somebody should. Well, this is one of those gray areas where I think you'd pretty much have to. You'd almost have to do it for yourself of just merging them all together. But I don't know that we could get away with releasing anything like that. Seems like it would be sketchy territory. Because there's no reason for them to be individuals other than the fact that that's how you don't. Because they're never going to get updated. They probably all only have a couple of records in them, so there's no risk of hitting that 4K limit or whatever it is that ESLs have. But that's interesting that the BA2 files have a limit. I learned about a limit that I have never run into, and I hope never to run into, although I never expected to hit any script data limit, is apparently the creation kit has a limit of the number of forms that it can load. And so if you have too many, so if you're working on some monster mod and you're requiring a bunch of the DLC, that I guess you can run into just like some sort of arbitrary limit on number of forms that can be loaded at once, which seems very very strange. Yeah, I hope never to see that. But I guess some of the big mod teams who are doing world space mods have run into that, and so they have to come up with creative solutions to actually be able to even work on their own mod because they can't load up everything they need to, that seems like a pretty big mistake on Bethesda's part. Like, they should have been prepared for that. But maybe that creates an arbitrary cap for them to work around, to be like, all right, our games are only if we get past this limit, we're putting too much effort into this game, and we need to split it into the next game. Because there's got to be I got to imagine it's easy in games like these open world games to just get too ambitious as the creators. It's where it's like, let's go 5 times the size of the Skyrim map, or let's put in, you know what I mean? Like you could easily go crazy with it, especially because they're probably they're experts with these tools, so they can probably build out more stuff real fast compared to those of us in the community. But it seems like an odd limit to have was all I was thinking. I would think in your toolkit you'd want to have no limits like that. You'd want that thing to be able to just handle whatever you throw at it.
Like I get the impression that Creation Kit is, I mean, it's still ultimately the same tool that was the Fallout, or sorry, the Oblivion construction kit.
Probably.
The user
I never
user
used
interface
that.
is so similar. Yeah, it's surprisingly hard to get it running. It's
I hear that about Oblivion
yeah,
mods in general, is that people who go, it's not nearly as easy to get up and running as Skyrim or Fallout 4 now.
yeah. There's because yeah, you need to patch it just to get it to load 4 GB of memory.
Sure.
Uh, there's like a whole like array of crash fixes you have to install. You need the toolkit extender.
Oh man.
Yeah,
It's a lot of stuff. Yeah, it's I cannot sing the praises of Bethesda's mod support enough. It would be interesting to see if another game company comes into this space to try and support it. No, because there has to be, especially people like CD Projekt Red, who are in the same space or in the same genre now, like The Witcher 3. Yeah, I mean, all the Witcher games really did it. They had a fairly open world, but Witcher 3 really not only pushed it into that direction, but also had the fan service to back it up. There's enough people interested in that series now, to where if you start seeing more games recognize or more game development companies recognize the loyalty that having a mod scene develops, like the number of people that play Bethesda games for life. I mean, we're still talking about playing Skyrim. That game's 7 or 8 years old. There are still people to this day who play Morrowind, and it's because of mods. It would be interesting to see if more games try and go into that territory of knowing that, hey, this will end up spurring this crazy loyal fan base who will always purchase our stuff. And I think that we're also the people that tend to purchase all that overpriced garbage that the plastic garbage they put out. Because we're just hooked on it. Like I have like a little shrine to Fallout over by my television because they whenever they put out stuff that calls to me, I gotta have it.
yeah, and that there's mod teams porting each of the games to the other ones, like Sky Oblivion and Skywind, and
Yeah, I'm so excited. I hope those happen. I hope those happen so
yeah,
bad. Because man, it's funny that. I wouldn't say I care about graphics that much. Like the fact, I mean, I think any Bethesda player can say that with confidence because our games always look a few years behind the mainstream. But trying to go back and play something like Morrowind is hard with those graphics. Where it would be very cool to see a graphically updated version of those games, and not only that, but there's also just little gameplay and quality of life improvements too that come with going up the next engine level. But man, those graphics, those are something else. Did you pick up Morrowind the other day when it was free?
I already had Morrowind, so
Oh, okay. So you didn't need to.
yeah,
I had it on Xbox. I played it way back in the day on the big monster Xbox, and so I never picked it up on PC because I had never modded that game. I still haven't to this day. I don't know that I ever will. It's just gonna be one of those ones where it's gonna live on in infamy and nostalgia for me.
yeah. I picked it up when I first heard about the More Oblivion,
Yeah.
and back then it wasn't running so well, but now it looks great.
Right.
I played my way a little bit into More Oblivion, and I was really impressed.
Did they finish that project, or did it just get to like an open beta point?
Uh, it seems finished enough that you can play through it. Like
Okay.
all the quest and storyline is done.
Okay.
Occasionally, they're still publishing like little fixes and cleanups and stuff, but yeah, I think the basic project is finished.
That's awesome that they did. That gives me hope that I will one day get to play Oblivion because I picked up Oblivion during the height of and everybody's heard me tell this story a million times, so I got to stop telling it. But I picked up Oblivion during a World of Warcraft addiction, and so I didn't give it a fair shot. I played it for like 15, 20 hours and then put it down. And then I tried to play Oblivion again a couple years ago, and the graphics and some of the gameplay were so clunky. It was like, nope, not doing it. So now I'm hopeful for Sky Oblivion one day. That'll be and I'll get to see Oblivion through fresh eyes in a game engine that I'm confident in.
Yeah, I found that personally, I found the combat in Oblivion frustrating after Skyrim.
Yeah, that was my problem
Uh,
too. It
yeah.
was too clunky. But the I've seen some images of people having modded versions, because that's another crazy thing the community does. So not only do we have all those community members putting out tools, there's also then the people who tend to like retexture the entire game and or remodel it all. Like that seems to happen in tons of games, but especially in Bethesda. Is that I imagine they're like everything in Oblivion has been recreated at this point. Like there's probably a high texture version you could download from across the community. Or,
Oh yeah. And there's unique landscapes and better cities, which completely, yeah, changes all the cities and all the landscape.
so that just looks way more modern than what I recall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's enough to drag even a modern computer down to like a frame rate of like 10 per second. It's,
That's awesome.
yeah.
That's what I love how God, what's that game? Starts with a C. It came out like 10, 12 years ago, and it's still like a system melter today if you put it up on max settings. God, why can't I think of it? It was this FPS. I can't remember the name of the engine, but I'm sure tons of people listening are screaming at me what it is. But there, God, why can't I think of it? Whatever. Anyway, some of the it's not hard. Like it wasn't hard to build older games that could continue to push the limits of systems with the right amount, with the right size of textures and detailed models. So that's pretty awesome that they can do that with Oblivion. Because man, that game,
Yeah.
that's an oldie now. I mean, hell, how old? Like Elder Scrolls just had its 25-year anniversary, and I know Oblivion would have been the fourth one. But they used to make games a lot faster, so it would have been, the time between Daggerfall and whatever the first one is, and Daggerfall and Morrowind would have been a hell of a lot shorter than the time frame is now, where they'll spend 5 years developing a game. It was the turnaround time on games used to be pretty damn fast, even for big games, which is very weird. Like if you ever go watch some of these game dev conferences and their speeches, they'll talk about how like they rolled out Doom in less than 9 months. It's like, are you kidding me? You built a whole engine from scratch with 6 people in 9 months, and now it takes people 5 years to build a game. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So have you ever regretted your decision not to go into programming now that you've found it as a hobby in the game world, or is this where you prefer it? You like it as a hobby?
I mean, I regret not having the money that I would have had going to that profession, but
Sure.
but yeah, I mean, I think I'd have been pretty unhappy doing it as a career.
Because did you ever have a dream of going into game development at all, or do you just like this tool side of things, of like looking into data files and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, when I was a teenager, like that was my dream,
Yeah.
is go into the gaming industry. But when I actually talked to some people who worked at EA, because I happened to at the time live near EA Sports,
Okay.
and
That seems like a good
were,
place to get turned off. I'm already thinking
Yeah.
about what you're gonna say. Oh man, EA.
they were miserable, and it was a lot of their projects were just classic death grinds,
Yeah.
death marches. That's the term.
Right.
They'd be like way behind, and everyone's doing 16-hour days,
Right.
and the quality of the code's getting worse and worse because you're doing 16-hour days.
Right. So you're just like melting your brain day after day on stuff you don't care about. Yeah, that sounds
And
pretty brutal.
I mean, I think being in like a little indie company would be probably a lot of fun, but and I thought of if I ever have some free time, try to do some work on an indie project.
Do you play many indie games?
I do. Yeah, I always have a few on the go.
What are your like all-star? Because I love looking at the indie scene, and I watch people Twitch stream indie games all the time, but I've never got into it myself. I'm not sure what type I'd want to play because I've been such an addicted open world RPG player, and that's not really something that an indie company is going to handle. So if you were going to recommend, if you were going to recommend something to me, knowing I'm a Bethesda and open world junkie, and RPG, what would you recommend as an amazing indie title? Not necessarily obviously in that genre, but something you think I might like.
Let's see. I recently played through Tides of Numenera.
Tides of Numenera. I've heard of that. Okay, what kind of game is that?
Yeah, it's an RPG, kind of in the old BioWare style, like Baldur's Gate and
I love those
games like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of in that vein. Just incredible story. A a lot of options just in terms of like making decisions.
Is it ISO? Is it like the old school like Baldur's Gate 3D terrains, but you just see them from that overhead view?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. And it's sort of a spiritual successor to Planescape Torment,
Oh
which was
man, this yeah. See, I should be playing this game. I loved Planescape Torment, and I actually played Planescape Torment years after it came out. Like this is like probably in the last 6 or 7 years, and I was blown away by that game. Like the story is so good. It's so unique in its setting.
yeah. This game is completely in the same vein. Its full title is Torment: Tides of Numenera,
Ah, okay.
because it's some of the same developers and writers.
Gotcha. Yeah, did it get kickstarted? Is that why I've heard of that? Because I tend to follow. I used to
It
follow a lot of Kickstarter campaigns.
it did, yeah,
Yeah. Okay, that's why I heard
and
it.
yeah, and I mean I've read a lot of people who criticize the game for this and that, but I mean I
Sure.
think for an indie game that was done through a Kickstarter, it's magnificent.
Yeah. Yeah, those are. I'm always amazed. I think Kickstarter program or anything, Kickstarter anything, whether it be a product or software or documentary or whatever it is, I'm always amazed when they actually get finished. Just as much as with these like giant mega mod projects, because they always seem to. When you look at the numbers they'll raise, it'll be like we need $60,000 to pull this off, and then I think about like how much work is going to be involved, how many people's man hours. I'm like, that's not going to pay. That's going to pay like one guy's salary, and then you're going to be lucky to have enough money left over to do the first production. Like what? So Kickstarter success stories seem to be like 1 in a million in my perspective, just because I've been burned on so many, and I've made bad choices about which ones I invest in.
Mm.
So
Yeah, it might not be the best way of doing software projects. Uh, yeah, I mean, it seems like it's great for doing little like manufacturing things, like making a prototype of a thing,
sure.
but or getting like I've heard of bands getting their album recorded that way.
Sure. Yeah, you have
Just
a flat rate to get into the studio or whatever. Yeah, but software can just
yeah,
spiral out of control with development costs because you just don't know what kind
yeah,
of problems you're going to run into.
yeah. When I was doing my in computer science, one of the things they said is that 50% of all software projects overruns its time and budget,
Well,
and,
that's
and it
why
rises
like
to
that's why EA was doing those death marches, is because they
yeah,
run into that.
yeah, and it rose to 80% for big projects, and
Oh, Jesus.
every game is a big project.
Right. Oh, well, I think that's yeah. I that's been a constant struggle for myself of trying to measure how much time it's going to take to do any particular thing. It's very challenging because some of the things
Yeah,
I will think will be simple as hell end up taking. I mean, a lot of times I'll come up with an idea for a feature for some settlements. I'm like, I could do that in 4 hours, and then it's like eight days later, and I'm still debugging the first bit. And then other things like I just finished up the code for a feature in the next patch. And I was like, all right, this is going to take me most of the week, and I had it done in like 3 hours and working perfectly. So it's so random, and it's
nice.
very hard to gauge what's gonna work out and what's not. Especially, well, it's just, in modding is especially difficult because I don't know the underlying code or what kind of things, but what kind of limitations I'm going to run into from Bethesda's engine. But even when you're doing working with your own code, that can still be a problem of, what kind of things did you think about in advance with your abstraction, or how when once you try it out, does it work as smoothly? And like user experience is such a big deal with games that sometimes things in your head you don't play out the way you'd think they would. So then you've got to, basically that work is all wasted because you didn't know that it was going to be unfun until you took the time to develop it. So there's like so many potential pitfalls in software dev where I can see that just things like that spiraling out of control easily.
Yeah, I, I should start wrapping up. I've
Oh yeah.
got my girlfriend here on the couch waiting for me,
Oh, no problem,
waiting
man.
very
That's
patiently.
right. Well, thanks for your time, man. I appreciate you talking about Forum Tools. I hope to see more out of you in the future, and definitely hit me up if you want more help. Hopefully, some of our listeners here will hook you up with some save files so that you can continue to research all that stuff. And So
Yeah.
on behalf of the community, man, thank you for all you've done for us.
Oh, likewise. Sim Settlements. I mean, it makes Fallout 4 what it is, I think, nowadays.
Oh well, I appreciate that. Very flattering. All right, man. Thanks for joining us. Take care.
You too.